joined by Justin McNulty. Justin, the colour of that tie, it's multi-layered.
I had to wear orange, seeing as I knew I was coming to the kingdom of Mourne, the old enemy, down. Our nemesis all through my youth.
That's the Armagh colours, of course.
Absolutely.
And you won an All-Ireland medal with Armagh in 2002.
2002.
2002. Mm-hmm. Where did you play?
Fullback.
Really pivotal position.
Important position. Listen, every position on the football team is important.
Yeah.
But obviously, central fullback is a crucial position. You're the last line, and
your job would be to negative full forwards.
Yeah, many very daunting tasks I faced throughout my career, and
yes,
none so great as that in the All-Ireland final. Marking Tura Artura, a wonderful footballer, and trying to minimise his threat was a major challenge.
I can imagine that. And who did you win, or who did you beat to get there in the semi-final and final?
Semi-final we played Dublin and beat them obviously, and Kerry in the final. So we won it the right way.
Well, you can't be accused of being a flash in the pan, beating them boys.
Yes. So.
Yes. How did that prepare you for heading for Stormont to represent the SDLP?
That was not part of the plan. Football was, there's a bit of talk about religion today, and I think football was my religion. And growing up in rural South Armagh, all I dreamed about from when I was a young boy was playing for Armagh, donning the orange of Armagh and playing for Armagh. I was in Armagh dressing rooms with my dad, who was the coach in '82.
Joe.
They got to a league final, and in the dressing room at Croke Park before big games, '83, 85. And so football was always there. I went to all those games with my father as coach, under 21s. He was the coach, and he was the coach of the club team. So I was always there with my twin brother in the round dressing rooms, and I dreamed about playing for Armagh and dreamed about winning the All-Ireland medal. And thankfully, that dream came through, and it hasn't come through for so many. So I feel very, very blessed that did happen. And how did it prepare me for politics?
Like if you had met a full forward like Danny Kennedy there, for example.
Danny would have been tricky. It would have been tricky to mark.
Lethal.
Yes, there's a good grounding in terms of sport, in terms of the values you get from playing on a team, and the values you get from understanding what it takes to be successful and win, and that lends itself well to politics.
Wonderful, a great achievement. And Danny, from an Orange perspective as well, in a different layer, if you like, how important is the Orange Order to the Unionist community? Are there any other organisations that are there to bring people together?
No, I think the Orange Order, in many ways, is quite unique in that respect, in that it is a bulwark within, I suppose, the Protestant community, through either culture or religion or politics. And there are people in the Orange Order who view it from different perspectives, and from those perspectives, there are people who say it's a political organisation or semi-political. There are people who say it's a cultural organisation. People say it's a religious organisation, and so there are different strands to it. I think the interesting thing about it is that it kind of was the one organisation within Protestantism that was able to cross the inter-religious divide within Protestantism, right? So Church of Ireland, Methodists, Presbyterians could all meet under that banner, and likewise from a political point of view. Now, I mean, historically, the Ulster Unionist Party had official links with the Orange Order, which were severed something like 20, 25 years ago now, right? But up until then, Orangism was seen as, you you ought to leave your politics at the lodge door, or your party politics at the lodge door. And so it became a sort of the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, who could come and find common cause together in a cultural or whatever organisation you chose it to be. That, I think, is the disappointing thing for someone like me to see it so demonised now within the wider community. And I think the benefits that it brought, that sense of community, to a fairly sizable section of our people, in a non-threatening sense. And I think that's rather got lost in the argument that says they're only, hard-headed bigots and all of that. Look, the same people who are in the organisation work and trade and do business with their neighbours and their friends and their farmers and their, on a daily basis. And somehow we've arrived at a situation that because they don a particular colour on a set date in the middle of July, that somehow they're now accused of being, monsters. I think it's a huge mistake. The demonisation of the Orange Order has been a huge mistake for relations in this country.
Mitchel, Orange marches often are controversial, but your people in Derry have come to terms with this. You have an agreement with the apprentice boys and so on. How did that come about, and what can be learned from that? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it is a very interesting episode in itself. It had exactly the same kind of background that Danny's only after talking about, which actually speaks volumes for how little knowledge and understanding we have of each other. So the marches generally were controversial, and there was protests and people going to law and going to the Praise Commission and whatever. It was very antagonistic and very intense kind of period. And there's no question in my mind that it actually could have been avoided, as we discovered in Derry. Because in Derry, obviously, it's a nationalist majority city. And in the case of the apprentice boys, their headquarters is on the West Bank, which is almost 99% nationalist. And it never actually come to the point, but it was quite clear that the marches could have been prevented. And I mean physically prevented, not prevented by agreement or by arrangement. So we got a situation where, in fact, people decided to talk about it for the first time, getting round a table. And I know what I learned from it, and the Bogside Residents Group, which was the interface with the apprentice boys and the Orange Order. And what we discovered in the process of dialogue is that there was a very ritualistic significance about walking on the walls, about walking to particular gates, part of the initiation process, touching a particular part of the wall, and a fairly ancient and legitimate kind of procedure in terms of the initiation processes. So marching was a necessary element of that. Where nationalists, including me, saw these marches down the walls because, like, they were overlooking the Bogside as being deliberately provocative. But they had no other way of getting to the point, no other way of completing the initiation process. And so once it was explained, then, people were obliged to kind of respond to that, because the purpose wasn't to deny people their entitlement or their culture. It was to get over this kind of perception that there was a deliberate attempt to insult or to embarrass or to intimidate and you know, once it was clear that that actually wasn't the intention of anybody involved in this kind of conversation, then it was a common sense arrangements. What time are the marches? How long will the marches last? Where are they going? So that nationalists could actually, if you like, hold up their end of the bargain, which was to make sure nobody interfered with, you know, if there was a segment of the march as part of, say, the initiation process, and that was only one element of the entire process that was set out in some detail and explained. Then, you know, nationalists were able to kind of identify their role in making sure that that went peaceably and that nobody either deliberately or through ignorance found themselves being annoyed or offended. Where it leads to is that now, I mean, there's absolutely no public dimension to this. It's just a matter of a bit of notice being served. People going and dandering along to a meeting, and it's kind of mapped out what time, what place, when is it happening, and we'll make sure at our end that it's peaceable. You get on with your march and have a good day. The All Ireland Fleadh was organised for Derry. I'm not quite sure the year, but it's around about 2012. So the Loyalist Band Association was approached and asked that they want to participate. And they said, well, we'll go and discuss it. And then they came back and said, yes, but we have one condition. And what would that be? We want to march on the West Bank. We don't want to be ghettoised, which was all the language that nationalists had been using for years. And that was agreed, readily agreed. And they came back with a positive and said, yes, we're going to participate. So they participated in the All Ireland Fleadh. And as they marched down Shipley Street, some of the band's people were in tears because they hadn't marched down Shipley Street on the West Bank for 20 years.
And that all came about by communication
and
talking.
Just committed dialogue. They explained their case, nationalists explained their angst, and between them they came up with a common sense and reasonable accommodation, which has held. Now, we haven't found a way of exporting that to other flashpoints, but we're doing our best.
Yes. It's an example maybe of sometimes one can give something without losing much to the other who can gain a lot from it. And are there any such examples, if you know what I mean, by simply giving way on some small thing, which doesn't mean all that much to me, but to the other side it's very valuable?
I think Danny will recognise the situation happened in Points Pass in 2002, the year we won the All Ireland, where there was agreement in the community that the 12 banners would be up, which were orange, but amazingly they were taken down in time for our All Ireland run for the orange and white bunting to go up. There was agreement in the community, and that goodwill that existed because of the consequence of that. But you know, previous to that, there was Seamus Mallon and David Trimble walking between the two houses of the two friends who were murdered in Callum's Bar. But then in 2002, that community agreement, which built a wonderful goodwill in the community, and that still exists very strongly in Points Pass. Even a few weeks ago, Rory Best was welcomed into O'Hannon's GFC to celebrate Rory Best in O'Hannon's GFC in Points Pass, where it was a cross-community event, which is wonderfully positive, wonderfully powerfully positive, an example to us all, and it's the same as what Mitchel has just outlined, what happens in Derry, and that's the way we should thrive together.
I think it does happen.
Sorry, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, there are other examples locally where that level of cooperation exists, but if you were to challenge people and say, does it exist, they would almost deny it. But accidentally, on purpose, in the run-up to July, I can think of a place like Newton Hamilton, where you know the Orange fraternity there will erect the red, white and blue bunting, and very often the week after will be the Ulster County final or something like that, and in previous years Armagh had been involved when obviously you were playing when they were a better team, but and that led to a different type of bunting gone up, and that was the orange, and yet there was space given between the communities to allow that to happen. There was no insistence that our bunting would have to stay up and yours would have to wait or anything like that. So I think there's a common sense approach that has always kind of existed almost in the rural area, and I mean I'm not here to bash sort of Belfast or anything like that there, but I think there are different cultural sort of conditions that pertain, and I think not least because of course Belfast is a deeply divided city. There are the interfaces, and you know, so
they don't know each other.
Well, those challenges are not something that we recognise as easily in the rural community where people have lived for generations and farmed together and worked together. So I suppose that's made it slightly easier to find accommodations.
Mm. It's and there's an appetite and hunger for it. I think as well there's that sense of neighbourliness. I remember actually a few years ago we were having an event here and we were making a presentation to Pete Seeger. Pete couldn't come over, but his grandson came. And I knew that Jerry Adams is a big fan of Pete's music. And I asked Jerry to come down. And I asked Jeffrey Donaldson. And at that time, people weren't shaking hands too much. And Jeffrey was uncomfortable coming. But he said, I'll come because you're a neighbour. And I never forgot that. And actually, I told Jerry about, you know, Jeffrey's uncomfortable shaking hands. And he said something like, well, I've got 2 bullets still inside me and I understand his pain. He understood it. But at the end of it, they didn't shake hands. They didn't have to. But they actually, Pete's grandson, Tao, sang Where Have All the Flowers Gone, which is written by his grandfather. And before the end of the song, I noticed there were almost tears in people's eyes, and I didn't know why. I was standing here. But both Jeffrey and Jerry were actually singing the chorus of the song. And in a way, it was just something, I think it was unconscious maybe, but there is something inside us all that is trying to find answers. Anyway, Danny Kennedy. The last time I saw you, I think, you give us a song. And what I would love is a man beside you with an orange tie on him. And maybe he could join in since you're both Armagh men. Do you think, could you step over it, Danny?
Well, do you think there'll be perfect harmony or
No, that's, I don't know, but I'd say there'd be a perfect unison, I think, anyway.
We're willing to give it a go, as long as your audience is properly prepared.
Oh, not too discerning.
I think we've got them all angled.
Right.
In fact, I think we've got the great Steve Cooney here and Eibhlis Farrell. Do you think could we get Steve and Eibhlis to come up and join in? Give them a big round of applause. Hey, Steve, how you doing?
It's a wonderful day, isn't it?
Grand day.
It's lovely to hear all people talking like this and sharing, as the Americans would say.
In fact, it's not the first time you played with Danny either.
No, we go back a long way.
Yeah, this is our reunion concert, really.
Oh, I see. A world tour coming on,
and we played Stormont.
We did?
Yeah.
We stormed Stormont.
Well, we certainly did. And
I think we need to expand our repertoire, though, for the next gig.
Well, I was thinking about that, but we'll see. Can we give...
The one that made you famous?
No. Well, it made you semi-famous too. So. There's one for county in Ireland, with memories so glorious and grand, where nature has lavished its bounty in the orchards of Erin's green land. I love its cathedral city, once founded by Patrick so true, and would ride into the heart of his bosom the ashes of Brian Boru. It's my old Irish home, far across the foam, although I've often left it to foreign lands to roam. No matter where I wander, to stays near or far, my heart's at home in old Ireland, in the county of Armagh. I've travelled each part of the county, from Newtown, Crockhill, across McLaughlin, and right back to the gap of Mount Norris, and home by Blackwater again, where the boys are so gay and so hearty, and unfairer than Erin so grand, and where are the boys that can court them, like the boys from the county Armagh. It's my old Irish home, far across the foam, although I've often left it to foreign lands to roam. No matter where I wander, to cities near and far, sure my heart's at home in old Ireland, in the county of Armagh.
Hey! Made that look easy.
And they said entertainment was dead.
Brilliant.
Is this
Brilliant.
not so? Thank you very much. Thank you
That
for
was
your,
excellent, thank you.
for your help.
Oh, you.
Sounded great.
That is fantastic. What a brilliant performance. I've never heard the boys in the county Armagh sing quite like that before, and with
Having
great
a laugh, you're having a
gusto.
laugh.
It's going to be hard to stop these boys winning all Irelands from now on. Or
I hope you're right.
Well, Tommy, I'll tell you a true story. I was asked one other night at a very large gathering to sing My Pleasure, and I sang The Boys of the County Armagh, and it was a sort of a very eclectic audience, and way down in the far corner there was a lady, and I noticed, and she was in tears, and the streaming tears down her, and at the end I went down and said, you know, I hope I didn't distress you, or are you from County Armagh? She said, no, son, I'm a music teacher.
well, we've come to a very special part of the evening, a very special man. The whole way from Zimbabwe. I think he speaks the language of this place, so. You got a hold of the accent here fairly quickly too.
Well, no.
Well, I'll talk more about him after a while. You're going to hear a song from him first of all. Please welcome Mr. Tura Artura.
Life is not about who's right, who's wrong, who's weak, who's strong. It's not about who's black, who's white, is it day or night. Kuja ugi namanenga wanyumbo ziri mumbu Benue, Benue Benue. Kuja ukina manenga kwa nyumba zili ngombo. Benue, Benue, Benue. Nambire woye, ndaronga hiwe, mukazi wanga shewe. Ndati huyo uzandonere Benue. See, life is not about religion. Who's a Protestant? Who's a Catholic? Who's a Muslim? Who's a Christian? Hindu? Arab or Jew? Who's me? Who are you? Benue. Kuja huku ina manega walimujiri mungu. Benue, Benue, Benue. Kuja huku ina manega. Gare, 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 gare. Boroma unura bwana niwe Boroma di mambo mambo jirombo bwana manana Benue 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 Benue. Life is not about who's a man or a woman, who's gay, transsexual, what's natural. Benue, Benue, 'cause humans, life is eternal, and we are immortal. Haiwa matinga, haiwa mazambugo. Uja ukwe na mana. Benue, Benue. Kuja ukwe na mana. Kwa nyumba zili mungu.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Tura Artura, and it's amazing. This is the first time you've played with Steve?
Yes, and it's a great honor to play with Steve. I've known Steve for quite a while now, and I said, one day I'll be good enough to play with Steve.
Beautiful.
He's a phenomenal musician and a heart.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm really looking forward to getting a tune from Steve after a while. But Tura, you landed in Ireland when?
1993, a summer, on 16th of July.
Yes.
You know, even our language in Zimbabwe is called Shona. And I've always had this affinity and connection with this place, even without even knowing it. But I've been here long enough now.
Yes, yes. And you come from Zimbabwe?
Zimbabwe. Yes, I was living in Cape Town. My ancestors are originally from Cape Town, and many centuries ago our family was forced out of Cape Town, Mpumalanga, and our family ended up in a region now called Zimbabwe. And I didn't know that until recently, that one of the key people who was involved in creating the situation in our country was a man called the Duke of Albuquerque. He was the chairperson of the British South African Company that was responsible in dividing our land.
What tribe did you belong to?
I belong to a clan called Mazaramunda. My totem is the fish. We are the Dziva people. We are the rainmakers. My mother's totem is the hippopotamus. My totem is the fish, the catfish that lives in the mud and sees in the dark. So Mazaramunda is the name of my maternal family, and Dziva is the name of my paternal family.
And your family were an important part of that tribe?
My family were, I don't want to bump it up for more than it is sometimes, but we all are important and we all make up an important family society. But my ancestor was involved in the resistance against British imperialism in 1896. And him and 26 others were beheaded and their remains brought to Britain as war trophies. So the family has always been part of the resistance and search for freedom for our people. And that has been the journey of even my mother, God rest her soul, my father's family, and my ancestor, Mazaramunda, who was beheaded.
Music and art are very important for you, Tura. Do you see music as something which goes beyond simply entertainment?
Yes, music is healing. Music is how we make sense of the world and everything around us. Some things we can't explain with words, but through art and music we can express those feelings. The vocabulary of feelings is much greater when you have other avenues to express.
And you have embraced quite a bit of the culture here, not only the Northern Ireland accent, but you learn Irish as well?
Yes. My grandmother said to me that, you know, you're going to a new country and they speak a different language. When you learn their language, you will speak to their heart and you will speak to their ancestors. So learning the language is opening up a whole different reality, a whole different world. And that is an experience that you can only have when you have the language experience, when you experience the language and you experience the culture and you immerse yourself into the essence of who we are as a people.
Steve, you've come from Australia to here and with Irish ancestors, of course, and you've not only embraced the culture here, but you've contributed so much to it also. In fact, you've got national awards left, right and centre, and quite rightly so. Can you identify with Tura's background?
I think it's fantastic hearing what he's saying. Well, I lived with the Aborigines in Australia. I went up to learn what it was to be an Australian, so I lived in the Northern Territory, the Aboriginal people, and consequently it was them who said to me, well, how do you expect to understand our culture? You don't even understand your own culture. Go back to the land of your ancestors and learn that culture, your own culture, and then you'll be able to appreciate our culture. So that was my reason for coming to Ireland. But a few things that Tura just said there really make a lot of sense to me, talking about the clans and the fish clan, and it's the same with the Australian Aboriginals. I think Indigenous peoples, there are certain sets of principles that go through Indigenous culture. And I think the heart of an Indigenous culture connects with the heart of all other Indigenous cultures. And I'd like the Irish Gaelic people to accept that they're an Indigenous culture too, and connect with other Indigenous cultures. But what Tura was talking about, the taking heads as war trophies, exactly the same thing in, with the Australian Aborigines, collecting heads. And I was peripherally involved in trying to help some people recover the heads, which were somewhere in the British Museum were bombed in the Blitz and destroyed. Others weren't. There's some at the College of Surgeons in Dublin. And we were trying to help people who were going over to try and recover the heads of their ancestors. I was quite amazed when I saw the form. If you want to claim a head from the British government, the form, the first thing is what continent is the head on, what country is it in, what this, it's such an extensive, I couldn't believe the huge amount of heads that were taken, for example. So that connected very much with me, that story there.
And that sense of going to civilize other people, the colonization thing, it's...
But also Tura has beautiful Irish in it, and when we met I said, "Could you make a tattoo?" And he answered, "Perfect." It's such a nice and respectful thing to do, I think, to speak the language of the ancestors, as you said, because it comes through to you on a deeper level when you...
It's so special to have the two of you at this moment in this place, very special. Tura, it has been known that you have danced. Do you think, could you give us a dance?
Oh yes, most definitely.
And we're going to be joined by Eibhlis here. And again, Eibhlis and Steve have never played before either. And it's just indicative of the skill and talent and
Lovely.
I want to introduce you to Eibhlis Farrell, a member of AOSDÁNA in Ireland, one of the wonderful academic groups of musicians in the whole island. And she will, well, Eibhlis, would you give us something to lead us into the future?
This piece is called The Bell of Brona, and the Bell of Brona is housed in the local church here, and it's a 9th century bronze bell, and I grew up listening to it at church services, and if you hit it you can hear all the overtones resonating out from the basic D pitch, and it's fascinating because you get all the, not just the overtones, but you get all the upper partials as well, which tinkle along and reverberate. So this piece, the bell itself, it was supposed to be, it was hidden for a long time in a tree, and then it was blown down in the big wind during the 19th century. And after authentication in Dublin, it was given back to the parish. And people used to say about it that if they heard the bell in the wind, that it meant that either a saint was entering heaven or that good luck was going to come to them. So it's a very special bell to have. It's a very special instrument to have in Rostrevor. And as I say, this piece, you'll hear different, what we call extended techniques, where it's not just placing the bow across the violin. I'm going to be plucking at strings. I'm going to be hitting it with the collegno, with the wood as the bow. I'm going to be playing a lot of harmonics up to give the impression. But so basically, you have to imagine that it's an old brass bell being struck, and that you're going to hear different kind of sounds and overtones, and there's passages of quiet in it as well, because I'm a great believer in that in music silence is as important as the notes, and so it's what happened after the notes have stopped and reverberate and what you actually hear. So there's different patterns as well, and the patterns tend to grow from small cells into longer cells. And there's one up-moving theme, a slow theme as well, which is meant to represent Saint Brona. The piece is quite long, so I'll just do a shortened version of it to give you an idea.
Eibhlis.